Hi, this is Antonio Mejorado, and this tutorial is to understand how do you use for in a function in Visual Basic for Excel. Okay, a loop is the repetition of several statements with a condition, and that condition could have a known number of times to repeat the statements, or it could be a variable number of times. It depends on the condition. So you could have a block of statements repeated by a condition several times, and that's a loop. In Visual Basic we could use the for loop. The for loop is when you know the number of times this block of statements will be repeated. So we have a variable that is very important. That variable will be initialized by a value, and for that group of statements, that variable goes from the initial value to a final value with an increment that is optional because the default value is 1. So every time you have from that initial value to that final value, you're going to repeat that statements that are between the for and the next variable statement. So you're going to know which variable will be repeated because between the for and the next, that variables will be repeated from the initial value you have to the final value you define. Here you have an example. We have a variable that goes from 1 to 10. That variable is I value, and the default value, the default increment is 1. So I value goes from 1 to 10, and each time you're displaying the value of I value. So the repeated statement is only the message box, so you're going to display the I value from 1 to 10. It's going to display 1 and then 2 and then 3 and so on until 10. Okay. This example number 2 is a wrong definition because, well, it's gonna, you think it goes from 10 to 1, but because it doesn't have any increment, it won't happen. So you're not gonna see anything displayed on the screen. There you go. That's the way, the correct way to display from 10 to 1. You should use -1 as an increment. You should use the step statement in the for. So you're gonna go from 10 to 1 with an increment of -1. So the first time is gonna be 10, the second time is gonna be 9, and so on. Example 4, using a function that gets n as parameter, we must display all the values from 1 to n. N must be positive, okay? So we're going to display 1, 2, 3, and so on. So we have a number in a cell, and then in another cell we're using our function display with the parameter. So there you have our function has the for loop that gets I number, which is the parameter, and the I counter goes from 1 to our parameter I number, and we're displaying I counter. I counter is the variable that goes from 1 to I number, and that is the variable we want to display every time. So it's gonna display from 1 to 5 in this case, and we have to return 0 as the return value. So we have to assign 0 to our function name disp. Here you have the example 5, using a function that gets n as parameter. We must to calculate the addition from 1 to n. So we have, if we have from 1 to 2, it's 3, from 1 to 3 is 6, and from 1 to 5 is going to be 15. There you have the different values expected to be returned from our function with this loop we have to define. So we have to assign 0 to our function name before the loop. Before all this loop, we have to initialize our function name, because then inside the loop that function name will be increased by our variable that is the variable of the loop. So it's very important to assign the function name to the same function name plus the value you want to increment, you want to accumulate to our function name variable to get the final result. So don't forget, you have to initialize that with 0 before the loop, and our variable will be increased every time to our function name by using equals function name plus variable. There you have the example solved. So we have I number as the parameter, addition equals 0. So our for goes from 1 to I number, and addition equals addition plus I counter. I counter is our variable of the for. So be careful, try to practice more on this. I hope you enjoy it so much as I do. Okay, bye bye.